A busy shopping centre in Kremenchuk, central Ukraine, and a horrifying picture is emerging. Far from the front line of this war, an apparent Russian strike. Ukrainian officials suggest more than 1,000 people may have been inside. In the hours before that, Ukraine was already dominating the conversation at the G7. And look top left there. President Zelensky was part of the discussions, but appearing remotely. He told those leaders present he hoped the war would conclude by the year's end and pleaded for more weapons.
There is no deal that the President Zelensky can really do. So in those circumstances, the G7 supporters of Ukraine around the world have to continue to help the Ukrainians to rebuild their economy, to get their grain out, to export their grain. And of course, we have to help them to protect themselves. And that's what we're going to continue to do.
Meanwhile, in the city of Sloviansk in eastern Ukraine, local authorities today accused Russian forces of firing a cluster bomb. Several are believed to have died. There was a first bang here, says Valentina, a resident. I was sending a message and the windows were shattered. We just dashed to the corridor and then we saw what happened. The broken windows were everywhere. I don't know what to do. Ihor, a resident here, was killed. In the last few hours, the summit has welcomed the leaders of emerging economies like Senegal and Indonesia. There's a lot to get through. Energy issues, climate change, COVID-19. All this as the war now appears to be intensifying once again.
Well, Julian is live for us in Westminster now. Julian, we're learning more about that strike on the shopping centre, aren't we? And this situation sure to dominate the NATO talks in the coming days.
Hi, Tessa. Ukrainian officials saying at least 2 people killed in that strike and perhaps 20 injured. There were crowds of people in that footage we just saw, so perhaps one hopes that vast numbers of people did manage to get out of the shopping centre, but obviously at the moment it really isn't clear. This NATO summit that's happening in Madrid over the next few days, some huge decisions to make, starting tomorrow's 3 days worth of talks. They'll be talking about sustaining support for Ukraine, and then obviously Sweden and Finland on the peripheries of this war geographically. They want to join NATO. There'll be lots of talks about that. The chief of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, has said in the last few hours he really hopes they can make progress on that.
And we saw Boris Johnson there, didn't we, at the G7. It's been a pretty bumpy few days for him, hasn't it?
Yeah, that double by-election defeat for him at the end of last week. This afternoon, those 2 new MPs have taken up their seats in the Commons. We've seen the new Labour MP for Wakefield. This is Simon Lightwood. He was given a warm welcome by Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, and then he got a rapturous round of applause from his new colleagues. Could there be even more Labour MPs on those steps in Westminster Hall soon? Well, speculation over the weekend that up to 6 Tory MPs could defect to Labour. It's become a game of guess who. Nobody's really saying anything, but the Tory MP for Bishop Auckland, Hannah Davidson, has said in the last few hours on Twitter that it isn't her. Boris Johnson, though, a really bumpy time for him ever since last autumn, really, but he has consistently polled better when he's doing foreign policy stuff with the war in Ukraine. So at least this week, with the NATO talks going on in Spain, plus these unfortunate events happening this afternoon in Ukraine, it does mean he gets to focus on that over the next few days.
OK, busy week. Thank you, Julian.